The year, 1006. The month, April. 250 years before the Aztec people arrived in the Valley of Mexico, founding Tenochtitlan, the place that would eventually become Mexico City. 200 years before Genghis Khan would create the largest contiguous empire the world had or would ever see. 60 years before the Norman invasion of England, bringing French influence to the English language and founding a monarchy that survives to this day. Just a few years before the mythological founding of the first Yoruba state, Ife, which was the start of one of the most culturally and linguistically rich societies in Africa, or the world for that matter, whose musical traditions would eventually leave a mark on much of our modern-day popular music. And 1,000 years before Mr. Gailey's freshman year of high school, where he attended Port Angeles High School and learned some stuff, I guess. But on a night, in the year 1006 of the Common Era, some 1,000 years ago, something curious happened. Imagine, you live in Egypt. It's 1006. It's a cool night. You're relaxing outside, perhaps on the bank of the Nile. You look up towards a group of stars your people would have seen as a jackal. You've seen this sky countless times and are well familiar with the pictures that seem to be painted across the heavens. But something was different this night. There was a guest in the sky, and it was brighter than any star you had ever seen. In fact, the only two things you've seen to be brighter are the sun and the moon. Stranger still, it doesn't go away. It hangs in the air every night, bright enough to cast a shadow, and it lingers for months. At the time, a local physician will write these words. I shall now describe a spectacle which I saw at the beginning of my studies. The spectacle was a large circular body, 2.5 to 3 times as large as Venus. The sky was shining because of its light. The intensity of its light was as bright as that of the moon, a little more than 1/4 illuminated. It remains fixed, moving daily with its zodiacal sign until the sun was in sextile with it in Virgo, when it disappeared suddenly. A continent away, if you were living in China, you would have seen the same strange phenomenon. Chinese astronomers, who were the unquestioned champions of the field for literal thousands of years, took detailed records of the events, noting its precise location and how its brightness changed with time. Right across the water in Japan, they too were observing this object and recorded their observations. In fact, we have solid historical records of this event from several places in Africa, Asia, and Europe. There also exist petroglyphs, that is, rock carvings, made by the Hohokam people who lived in modern-day New Mexico, that many people believe are a recording of the same phenomenon. And without a doubt, even if we don't have their records, there must have been people in all corners of the globe who looked up in the sky and wondered what this strange new object was. After all, the object was recorded as being 1/4 the brightness of the full moon, as being bright enough to cast shadows at night, and bright enough to read by. There's no way you would miss that. But what was this thing? At the time, the human species did not know much about space. Don't get me wrong, countless civilizations were mapping and tracking the stars and planets in the sky, and they used them to track the seasons, navigate, and for other scientific purposes. What's more, for many people, the night sky was a portal to the heavens. The night sky was a basis for, or retelling of much of their mythology, through which they developed their culture and codified their beliefs and values. I like to think that one of the criteria for when, through evolution, humans became humans was when they first looked up into the night sky and wondered what it all was. But when it comes to scientifically established understandings of celestial bodies, much of the heavens remained a mystery. The answer would eventually come almost 1,000 years later, in the early 1930s, when a German and Bulgarian astronomer working at an observatory in the United States made the observations for and proposed the idea of the supernova. Up to that point, there was already an understanding of novas, which are when stars significantly increase their brightness. And at first, these two astronomers thought that a supernova was just one of these normal novas, but bigger. They would eventually conclude, however, that a supernova is something else entirely, something much more dramatic. All right, it's time to pull back the veil of mystery, and finally just tell you what this thing was. Supernovas occur when large stars catastrophically collapse. There are a number of ways that this can happen that I won't go into now, but one thing they share in common is that their explosions are big, like really, really big. The average supernova releases something on the order of 10 to the 44 joules of energy. This is a 1 followed by 44 zeros, a number so big as to be useless. Put another way, though, a supernova, in a matter of days, will put out more energy than our sun will in its entire 10 billion year life. When supernovas happen in other galaxies, we can easily pick them out against the 10 billion other stars that make up their galactic neighborhood. And we can actually use these events to measure how far away those galaxies are from us. Now, what's really cool is that the guts of supernovas stick around as supernova remnants. And we can see them. We know that the event back in the year 1006 was a supernova because we've found it. Modern astronomers checked the records of astronomers from that time, pointed their telescopes where it had been seen 1,000 years ago, and they found it. An object we now refer to as SN 1006, named for being a supernova that was discovered in 1006. And though it's almost certain that this was the brightest supernova ever seen by humans, it wasn't the only one, and it was hardly the first. Going backwards in time, we have the most recent supernova visible to the naked eye, which was SN 1604, a supernova observed in the year 1604. Then we have SN 1572, 1181, 1054, 1006, 393, 386, and 185. I want you to stop and really imagine this. We have written records going back almost 2,000 years of human beings observing the death throes of dying stars from right here on Earth. What I love about the story is its narrative arc. It starts as a light in the sky, observed by people all across the Earth, by people who would never know each other, and in many cases didn't know each other existed. But they all thought this event was important, and recorded it in whatever way they could, on papyrus, on vellum, in stone. And 1,000 years later, their descendants were able to use their scientific understanding to go back in time and rediscover this now faint object that made a brief visit to the lives of our forebears. I want to leave you with one final thought. With our current technology and understanding, we cannot predict supernovas. And although we thankfully don't have any stars near us that are likely to explode anytime soon, there are countless supernova candidates within our galaxy. Some of them could erupt any second now. So keep your eyes open. Take some time to look up at the night sky every once in a while. You never know. You just might be one of the first people to catch a glimpse of SN 2019. Take it easy.